Now, we've got today another installment in our CTO series. Our CTO series is a kind of starting to become a monthly series for us where we interview some of the top technology leaders from around Australia and New Zealand. We've got Davina here from Eucalyptus with us, which I'm really, really interested in talking to her about managing people whilst managing yourself and kind of her journey from individual contributor to head of engineering at Eucalyptus. Now, Davina, do you want to jump on and join us?
Hey, everyone.
Hey, Davina, how are you going?
Hey, good.
Very good, very good. So I'm just going to give a quick intro on Terram. So we're a tech product development and strategy firm from Australia and New Zealand. Really, we love working on technology, all things product and development. And we also love chatting and connecting with everyone in the community and sharing some of the great things people are doing. That's the CTO series. And myself, I'm the founder and CEO of Terram. Built the company, got us onto the AFR Fast 100 2 years in a row. I've been involved in over 61 major product launches. I love doing this. I love everything about product. And I'm also an amateur sausage maker. I love sailing. Those are kind of two of my favorite things to do and to chill out. And actually I learned on the weekend, I also like chainsawing things because it's a very straightforward activity. You cut a log up and then you put it in a truck and then you burn it and it's job done. It's very simple operation. And so Davina, who's with us, as I mentioned, head of engineering at Eucalyptus. Eucalyptus, I think, is one of Australia's great technology success stories at the moment, really taking off. I think your investors are Blackbird and Woolies and a bunch of others. And you've got a background from working at Atlassian and Google and learned earlier that you're kind of outside of work, you love home automation. Maybe you could share a little bit. I think you were saying you automated your mop. Is that right?
Yes, at home, really big fan of home automation, and maybe it's just because I'm a little bit lazy, but have a robot vacuum cleaner, have a robot mop cleaner, I guess like for the floorboards, and then also have like hue lights, which are integrated with sensors so that they automatically turn on the lights as you walk past specific rooms, and you can like change the vibe of the room as well with the lights.
I don't know if that's lazy though, right? Like I feel like the lazier option is just getting the mop and mopping the floors or turning the lights on. Because what you're describing, I'm like, oh no, I've got to go and like research a mop that's automated and worry about if it's got enough battery power. And yeah, that's quite interesting. That's a very yeah, that's cool. Have you built your own stuff? Like, have you gone Zuckerberg style and built your own door greeting system or something like that?
Not yet. I think there are some like APIs and hardware and stuff that you could buy to then, you know, even use a Raspberry Pi to integrate some of that stuff. I think I'd prefer to buy off the shelf things because they usually work and they usually, you know, have proper ways to integrate with them. And to your point, yeah, I think maybe it's less lazy in the long term. That's the upfront cost, I think, is there's a lot involved there. But once it's set up, it's really good. So yeah,
no, it does sound good. So let's kind of kick on to what you wanted to chat about. Like I'd love just before we jump in and start talking about what you want to talk about, which is managing yourself in order to manage people, which is just an awesome topic. I mean, I'm pretty excited about it. What I'd love to kind of share with everyone is a bit of context about you. So you're a software engineer a couple of years ago. I think you're working Atlassian and Google, and you got involved in the startup scene a bit, ended up at Eucalyptus as an engineer, and you kind of grown up's probably the wrong word, but like moved up from engineering into now you're the head of engineering, and you've got how many teams have you got kind of working for you at the moment with you?
Yeah, so engineering, when I joined, I was the third engineer, and there are about 12 people in the company overall. You know, very small startup, early days. We're at around 30 in engineering, and in engineering itself, there's around 4 sub teams, I guess. And that will change over time as we have more business goals and different, I guess, domains and expertise that we need to kind of focus on. But
Yeah.
yeah, that's the general structure. And yeah, I've been at Eucalyptus for 2.5 years now.
Yeah.
So
and what does an engineering team look like to you? You know, how is it like all engineers, or do you have kind of testers in the mix? Have you got business analysts or designers in the mix, or they're a different team?
Yeah, I think our ideal like team model is based on just our experience in the industry that we're in. We have like elements of consumer business as well as like technology platforms, as well as needing to have best practices around security and data privacy. So I guess because of our use case, our ideal model is at most like 8 engineers per team, and then we've got a team lead who mostly focuses on the team delivery and the like performance management, people management side of things.
Yep.
Have a tech lead as part of that like leadership group, and they focus more on the architecture, like wider reaching changes that will impact other engineering teams, and they kind of drive the technical direction and quality of the team. And then we also have a product manager who obviously drives the product goals and the roadmap and the prioritization, which then feeds back into the engineering team. And for the more front-end facing teams, we then have a product designer as well, but they're usually shared across a few teams.
Okay, cool. And what language did you start in?
At Eucalyptus specifically?
Well, I always like going back to when you very first started. What was the first thing you wrote in?
Oh, I guess like I started my technology journey, I suppose, in HTML and CSS, you know, MySpace, Bebo, all that stuff.
Okay, yep.
Yeah, I was like old enough to experience that era. And then I guess my first proper language, I would say from university, was C. So
Okay.
low level.
Yeah. Have you used it again?
No, maybe if I do some home automation stuff, I'll get to reuse that skill, but no, I haven't.
Okay, and what's your opinion on JavaScript as a language? Controversial opinions only are allowed.
Well, my classic answer to these things is like, is it the best tool for the job or not? I would say TypeScript definitely over JavaScript, just because
Yep.
you know, type safety, strictness, it's just better to scale. I personally think it's quite an easy language to like onboard onto. I think a few of our engineers here didn't really use like Node.js or TypeScript before, but they were really like able to take that on board once they like learned that on the job. So I think it's good for that. I think the concepts are, you know, easy to understand as well. So yeah, I think it's a good language.
Okay. I feel like with JavaScript, it's one of those languages that you just got to put up with, because it's here and it's here to stay, and it kind of won the day, whether you like it or not. Like my C# would probably be my favorite language for the way it's been designed. Had the good fortune of being built after Java and learning from all the things from Java, and I learned in C and C++ as well, so it's got a special spot. But yeah, JavaScript was, I don't know, it is what it is my kind of you can't build anything. Yeah, and then having TypeScript on top is great. But so just to kind of now that we've got a bit of context on you and everything, why did you pick the topic managing yourself to manage others?
Yeah, I think if you just take half of it of managing, just like managing others, I think it misses the more personal aspect of moving into a management role. And at least my journey, it took quite a big of a leap from going, you know, individual contributor, different responsibilities into a management role. There's quite a emotional journey, I guess, that you go through. There's things that you don't expect to have to handle. And when you're dealing with people, mostly with your job, you yourself have to be able to, you know, manage those feelings and manage your own, you know, work-life balance and your own kind of decision making to then be able to positively impact other people. That's kind of why I chose the topic, because I think I've worked with a lot of people who have gone through the same journey that I have from IC to manager, and they're all from an engineering background. So there's a lot of common stories and learnings, I think, that I've kind of picked out of those experiences that I've heard. And a lot of people I talk to that make the transition do sometimes feel a little bit alone in that journey. And I'm hopefully going to help maybe alleviate some of those concerns, and yeah, maybe hopefully provide some advice to help that.
Okay.
I'm not alone and lost.
And just for those listening in, like IC means individual contributor. So So just a bit of is like IC is the in case, because some may not be aware, is where you're coding and you're producing output, and then when you shift from IC into management, you're thinking more about what are others doing and not so much about your own kind of output. But so I would love to ask then, what are some of the kind of lessons that you would share around that you've learned?
Yeah, I mean, so many lessons. Are there any like maybe we can focus in on parts of the role?
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have any like specific areas that you want to maybe focus on first?
Yeah. Well, let's go. Like, so managing yourself, what does that mean?
Yeah. I think you're not able to hide from your team when you're a manager. Like people look up to you, people are looking to you for decisions, people are looking at how you're acting, and like you're essentially at the end of the day a role model. And I think at a startup, especially because things are moving so fast, usually you're in quite a close-knit group at the beginning. It's quite an intimate setting. I think you're even more like your decisions and how you act is weighted even more compared to maybe when you're at a larger company. So I think managing myself, firstly, the decision around, do I want to become a manager or not? I think the process that I went through was, part of me was like, if I move into management, am I going to give up my technical skills? Am I going to give up that technical career
Yeah.
path? Because I think there's a lot of individual contributors that really want to move into a tech lead role or, architect. That was definitely, a thought that I had. And I think it really, whilst I definitely value like technical craft and I love engineering and the technical aspect of engineering, I think I just reflected on what actually energizes me. And for me personally, it's working with people, problem solving beyond like the code, but also around how do you design teams? How do you bring out the most in people? And I think that's really what, at the end of the day, made me really happy and what I felt was really rewarding. So I think I just decided, okay, I'm going to try the team lead path and see if I like it. Luckily enough, I was able to get that opportunity at Eucalyptus. I think partly came out of necessity because we were just growing so fast, needed a bit of organization, and I was already doing some of that stuff as well. So yeah, I think that's really where I saw my strengths playing out as well. And for me, the learning there was just to kind of lean into what actually you enjoy rather than trying to force something that seems good on paper but might not actually be what you want to wake out of bed for.
How did you do that reflection? Was it a case of was it something that just came to you, a realization, or were you a bit proactive about it and you kind of did the like listing out things that give you energy, things that don't give you energy? I'd love to hear a little about how you came to that.
Yeah, I didn't like really write it down. I think just took the time to reflect myself and just like even if it's just like sitting in a room like thinking, like I think that's definitely, I did that a lot. Even transitioning from a big company like Atlassian to Eucalyptus, being a very small startup, there was a lot of reflecting on, wait, I'm at this point in my career, do I feel happy at the end of the day? What are the parts of the day that do make me happy?
Mm-hmm.
And then what are the opportunities ahead that I can maybe like capitalize on to continue to trial those things. I spoke to a few other people as well who had gone through the journey, and spoke to people who had gone down the individual contributor senior route versus the team lead route, and kind of asked them like, what do you kind of do on a day-to-day basis? Like, where do you see your pain points are, and like, what are the problems you're trying to solve? And I think that kind of research helps solidify in my mind like where I could see myself in the next couple of years.
Yeah, awesome. And where did those people that you're talking about, were they kind of colleagues that you'd worked with, or were they people that you'd reached out to proactively to get to know? How did you get that kind of mentor network around you to ask that kind of question?
Yeah, I think at the previous companies that I had worked at already had really good connections and a network there just through my team. And like when I joined Atlassian, I was part of a like graduate cohort. So there's just like a web of connections everywhere. And I went to UNSW and there was like a lot of industry kind of networking events that happened there. And like I stayed in contact with some of those people. And then once you join the startup community, like there's such a rich like plethora of people who really want to help and really want to mentor and really want to share their wisdom with other people. And I've really benefited, I think, from the startup community in that sense, where I myself, I actually have like a full-time mentor that I can lean on when I have problems at work, or I have something I want to just bounce an idea off. I have someone to go to, and that was provided through the startup community. So once I joined Eucalyptus, there are more people that I could kind of connect with who had also done such an accelerated path into management as well, compared to some of the larger companies where it's usually quite a longer process and a bit more, I guess, hierarchical in a sense.
Yeah. And has that been one of the wins for you of joining a startup, is getting to go on that acceleration kind of journey?
Yeah, definitely. I think at some points it's like, whoa, like, can things slow down a little bit? But you're on a rocket ship and you got to strap in. I think like overall, it's been an amazing experience for me. And I think I probably wouldn't have been able to transition into let alone a head of role if I had stayed at a bigger company. I think the opportunities, you're just kind of like forced to lean into the strengths that you have and problem solve really quickly and make sure you're delivering outcomes. And I think all of that was just accelerated because of the startup life, really.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so now to the managing yourself bit, like what does that look like for you now? Or maybe let's start with now. Like, what does that look like? How's that evolved now to how are you using that when you're managing now?
Yeah, I think how I manage myself now has been driven by a lot of lessons learned and mistakes made in the past in terms of how I did not manage myself. I think
you get angry at someone, Davina? Did you throw tables at people?
No, but maybe internally, you internalize all of these feelings.
Internally, you threw a table at them. That's okay.
Yeah, I think you have these moments of you have all these things on your plate. You feel like you're behind. Maybe you're not in a great mood, and then you have a conversation with someone and they're upset, and it just like starts to burden you. But I think what I realized was it's to do a leadership role, or any role really effectively, is to be your best self. And I know it sounds super cliche, but I think it's such an important learning that I had, because when I was in a bad mood, everything was just bad. But if I took the time to like rest on the weekend, I'm the type of person who loves working. So it's very tempting for me to like go home tonight and just keep working and like have my laptop open. And even on the weekend, like, there's an endless list of things to do. So it's just so tempting to continue to work. But I was like, more recently, I've been more deliberate about not weekends are for like me, no work, like try and go for a swim, or try and set up your home automation or something that's like not related to work, just to stop. I think that has been a huge change for me, and I've just felt more energized when I come into work because I'm starting the day fresh and I'm coming in positive. Like that's I guess a personal, more like mental health kind of thing that I've implemented.
Then what about though when you're in the flow of the week, you're well rested, and come Wednesday morning you find out that, I don't know, you've run a campaign and the site's gone down because someone deployed a change that broke it, or like how do you then manage? What are some of the things that you're using to manage yourself in that moment in order to bring your best self, to use your words?
Totally. Yeah. Not even Wednesday afternoon. It's like Monday morning. Sometimes that's how it is. I think, an element of it is just taking a step back. Firstly, understanding what is the actual impact. Like, is it, some things when they build up, they seem like a big thing, but they're actually not that significant. First, I think it's like, okay, identifying what's the actual severity of this thing. And I think luckily, as we've grown and as I've kind of built out the engineering team, I have people under me that I can really trust. So, having a team of 30 people, I can't be in the details. I can't be in the weeds all the time. So over time, we've just made sure we have a really good senior and leadership group under me to support, so that I can be like, delegate, and those people, they know more than me, they have the expertise there, so it makes sense. And that's how I kind of regroup myself and be like, okay, these are the people I need to involve, these are decisions we need to make. And then you kind of just like execute on that, and then afterwards you can do a retro and just figure out like what went wrong. But usually like you have processes and systems in place to just like fall back to, rather than trying to get emotional in the moment. It's just like, what is the system? What is the framework I need to apply right now? Sounds kind of robotic, but that's kind of how I guess, dealt with some of these things.
Yeah. No, you take it away. If I were to play back what I'm hearing, you take it away from being an emotional activity, and you convert it into a process, or you try and make it as objective as possible.
Yeah, exactly.
How do you think about that when it's with a person and a personality or something like that?
Yeah. I would say it's different. I think the way that I try to manage people more so is, of course, always listening and being empathetic. And I think that's the part about managing yourself, is sometimes you might feel like you're in a therapy session with someone. And that's just because when people, work with you and they're open with you, sometimes there's stuff going on in their life that is affecting their work. And that's just kind of the reality of working with people. And sometimes like I'm still learning how to kind of draw the line of, okay, wait, this is not my job to kind of be resolving for you. Like, it's kind of like, let's just go back to how can I support you in a professional kind of work setting. So there's been moments like that, but I think it's always just trying to make sure that like you have a culture of feedback, you're understanding, like if someone feels like they can trust that you will support them and that there's a safe environment to talk about these things. I think those are the moments where I feel like I have to bring my best self. Like those are the moments really where I feel like that's where I need to be managing myself and coming in with a good mood, because I don't want to have an open chat with someone and not be in the right frame of mind. Like I need to give myself to my report and make sure that I'm, supporting them the best I can in terms of like a work setting. So those things is what I save my energy for, I guess.
Okay. And that's quite interesting, right? So do you think about prioritizing where you put your energy over the day?
Yeah, I think I do. Like normally in terms of how I run my day, I'll look at my calendar's normally stacked. So it's like, hey, what are the different meetings I've got going on? What do I need to prepare for? There's like some meetings that I have in the day that's more focused around projects. There's some meetings around, improvements or engineering health backlogs and stuff like that. I think I know how much I need to invest in beforehand. And then if I have one-on-ones, I make sure I have my notes ready for the one-on-one meeting. It's like, are there any updates I need to give? Is there anything I need to like get feedback on? Is there anything I want to give feedback to that person on? And then structuring it that way so that when we enter the one-on-one, we have a clear kind of agenda of these are the outcomes we want to have out of our chat. Because I think then and without that structure, I found that I was kind of like, we were going on tangents, and then we were talking about like, oh, your dog, like, ate a tennis ball, like, oh, how sad, like, oh, what's going on with your dog? Like you would just like go off on random tangents that weren't related. So I think that has also brought a bit of balance into, okay, what are the things we're actually trying to talk about in our one-on-one, and like, how can I help you with these things specifically? So yeah.
So if someone wants to talk about their dog and their dog's ball in their one-on-one, do you let them, or are you like, nah, process, I've got an agenda? How do you balance that?
Yeah, I think if it's, usually coming into the one-on-one, you're like, oh, like, how are you going? And like, you kind of just, keep it jovial and, whatever. And then it's like, okay, let's pull up the agenda. Let's make sure we run through these things. Usually we end up running up to the time that's allocated. So if things do go off track, like unfortunately, because I'm at this stage now where I can't afford to just be casually chatting all the time, I'm just a little bit more strict now. But in the past, when I was a team lead, it was a little bit more casual. I would be honest there. Yeah.
Yeah. Someone made fun of me once because in my meeting agendas, sometimes I allow time for chit chat.
Yeah.
Like, what are you doing? I'm like, well, that's what happens. We waste 10 minutes chit chatting. So I might as well stick it in the beginning.
Yeah, make it official.
And then when 10 minutes is up, we're on to the agenda. No, that's really, so actually I want to stay with this topic of structure, because I actually think it's quite handy, and it's something as a CEO that I have found really helpful, seeing how other people spend their time. And I say it not just, what I've also found helpful is to try and find people that maybe I've worked out have similar energy rhythms as me and similar style to me, because I think style, energy, rhythms is all really important. And what do I mean by that? Like some people's energy rhythm is like an early of the day energy rhythm. I'm an early of the day person. That's when I get my best work done. Other people have an energy rhythm at nighttime is where they might get their best done. And studies have kind of shown that that's a real thing in different people. And so like learning who you can, you know, I know some people that don't get the day. I think from Atlassian, Mike's kind of quoted as like his day doesn't start. Mike Cannon-Brookes, one of the founders of Atlassian, his day doesn't really start till 10 or something, and he'll work later, for instance. I'm a bit more of like a morning person. So like this morning I was up at 4 getting a bunch of presentations done because my day is full of meetings. So that's when I prefer. And then at nighttime, I go to bed basically. But I know everyone's got different rhythms. So I just want to stick on my whole kind of thing is a roundabout way of saying I'm fascinated by how people structure their time, because I think especially if you're new to management, it's really helpful because it's suddenly, you know, there's kind of no structure and it's chaos unless you take responsibility and manage yourself. So I'd love to know from you, like, how do you plan your time?
Yeah. Yeah, and it changes as well as you move into your role and take on different responsibilities. Like I think how I manage my time now is slightly different to how I manage my time as a team lead of, you know, less people. I think for me, I always go back to what are the expectations of my role, and I've kind of bestowed that upon my reports as well. And like the engineers, like we have a rubric or like a competency matrix style thing that's like, these are the key things that we're looking for, and these are the things you kind of need to make sure you're working towards. And I've written something for myself as well that my manager, who's the CEO, like we've aligned on, that's my job. So I usually prioritize things in terms of, hopefully like you're not firefighting all the time. Like usually there's like the most urgent things, like they always come up, and then by the end of the week you just feel like I just did like a bunch of firefighting and no strategic work. I think luckily we're like probably over that stage now. I mean, it comes and goes, but
Probably going to walk in the office tomorrow and eat your work. Yeah.
Maybe it's happening right now and I don't even know. But yeah, I think like for me, engineering, whenever someone asks me how's it going, the 3 things I go back to is, at least in the Eucalyptus setting, for engineering, it's like 1, how is security and like data privacy going? Like always priority. 2nd is how are we enabling product capabilities? Because engineering is there to make sure we can easily build products and quickly build them. And then 3rd is always improving like developer efficiency and how people actually are utilized in their day-to-day. Like are they the release time slow, like, you know, stuff like that. Is the development lifecycle like efficient? And then I usually go back to those and I'll have like tasks for the week that I'll outline. I'll have maybe a major goal that I want to have. For example, this week, really wanted to nail the security engineer job description and the interview process. And like, that's the main goal I'm going for. If I don't do anything else and I just do that, like, you know, I feel like I've accomplished.
You get a stamp at the end of the week.
Yeah. And then there's other tasks that, you know, I'm blocking my leaders, or there's some, you know, future planning stuff that we need to do around OKRs. Like it depends on the time of the month as well. Like OKR planning happens towards the end of, it will happen in a month's time. So just starting to prepare that stuff out. And yeah, that's kind of how I plan my time, and always making sure there's a bit of buffer time, because things will always come up and you'll kind of have to be able to respond if it's critical. So I think just accounting for that and not completely swamping yourself like with like back-to-back meetings, I think it's important to integrate into your schedule. And sometimes it means saying no to meetings. Sometimes it means saying, sorry, I have to have only 30 minutes for a one-on-one today because, you know, there's this other thing that I have to get to. Like it's kind of like making trade-offs at different points, I think.
Yeah. And how do you think about your days? What's a day look like for you? Do you have a set schedule per day? Yeah,
I think I'm probably more of a night owl. I try to, it's funny, I think most managers say this as well. They try to kind of start work early because people aren't around, like to distract you. So you can do a bit of like reading or like focus work. And then usually the middle of the day is like, I reserve that for, meetings or just kind of being available, kind of like office hours style. And then towards the end of the day, that's when I try to do more execution work. And that's just like, my style. So that those are like the 3 blocks of the day.
Yeah.
And I try to make time for team lunches and stuff as well. And, always engaging in the social part of the team, because I think, it's important to do the work, but I think it's also important to have a culture where people feel like, you're a friend to them, and you can outside of one-on-ones, you can chat about your dog, you can chat about like go for a beer and like, just have a good time. Like, I think that's the culture that I want to work in, and that's kind of what I try to encourage as well with the teams.
Awesome. Now let's kind of shift tack a bit. I will say, if there's any questions from anyone that's on the webinar with us, like, please put them in the chat and we can like make it part of the conversation. We'd love to hear from you. But just kind of maybe changing a little bit of tack is, how are you now working with your engineers that, well, let's start, like, how do you have a conversation around, does someone want to stay going down the IC path, architect, or like, some organizations have got distinguished engineers or principal engineers, whatever you want to call it, like, or do you want to go down the management path? And there's different flavors of management as well, right? Like, there's all different. Let's maybe start there, and then we can look at then how you working with your team leads as well. So I'd love to hear what are your thoughts on talking someone through that?
Yeah, we've had a few people go through this decision and also pursued the specific path that they were interested in. I think usually it comes up because they'll see certain people in certain roles, and as you develop their career plan and go through, these are the expectations of your role, it's like, okay, what actually is this person working towards? And that's usually when the conversation comes up. Are you working towards senior engineer, or are you working towards trying out management? I think we try to structure our roles and teams such that there is flexibility. Like, I think the worst thing is for someone to be like, oh, if I make a decision, I can't go back on it. And then people just end up not making a decision at all because they're scared of like making that commitment, and rightly so, because they don't know exactly how it's going to feel or how it's going to be for them. So I think for us, we try to make the decision less, I guess, less pointy by being like, let's trial it and we can transition you into an acting kind of role, give you the responsibilities that would be like for a team lead, for example, and then we'll trial it for 3 months, have a kind of, check-in point and be like, do you feel like this is the right role for you or not? If not, pull back. And then, I think at least the team is like, it's a bit disruptive, but I think the team is quite receptive because everyone just wants everyone to succeed and have those opportunities. So that's one way we make the conversation easier. And then the second one is we also have a rubric for engineering leaders. So there's like a tech lead, team lead, even a head of engineering kind of set of competencies and responsibilities that outline what you would be expected to do. So, if someone really loves architecture and really loves defining standards and writing tech docs, that leans more towards the tech lead role compared to the team lead role. And we've tried to have those roles be distinct because in the early days, like having a blended team lead tech lead role, that makes sense. But I think we want to encourage individual contributors to feel like they can have, a career path and progress towards leadership, even if they're not managing people. And I think that's the one way that people usually make the distinction is like, do I want to manage people or not? So yeah,
that's different focuses and skill sets and energy, like as you say, like it's different energy, and it appeals to different people, right? So it makes total sense. Yeah,
exactly. So yeah, we've had things like three engineers, like senior engineers, move into team lead roles, and then a few engineers move into tech lead roles as well. And all my reports, except like 1 or 2, have actually gone through that transition here at Eucalyptus with me. And it's been a fun journey to see them, and then also see them flourish when it is actually the right role for them. I think that's really what's rewarding for me.
Awesome. And do you kind of help them on how to structure their time and how to like think about that? How is that something you spend a lot of time with them on? And maybe to get even more specific, when someone's just starting and has made the transition, what are kind of the key? Do you find yourself repeating the same things? And if so, what are they?
Yeah. I think in the early days, yes, being there to support them, like they'll always have questions around, I've got 3 things on my plate, which one do I do first? And it's like, okay, what are the priorities for your team? What are the principles that you have? what's actually urgent versus something maybe you can just delegate. So again, there's like a set of like principles and stuff that you can kind of teach someone. That's like with the first report. But then what I've seen over time is as you get more team leads, they're actually helping each other, and I don't have to be the one to mentor them. So we now have like a team lead forum. We've also got a tech lead forum, and I sit in on those, and we all kind of discuss common problems that come out, and they're the ones kind of solving them instead of myself. And I think they're able to support each other. And I think I realized having a peer group at your level is such an important thing to have, especially if you're new to that type of role. I think it just makes such a big difference. So yeah, now I can kind of stand back and they run their own initiatives and they can kind of lean on each other, and I think that's really the ideal state.
Okay, and there's one on this topic of people getting started and transitioning, which is around Soraya's asked a question, which is making the transition to leader can sometimes be difficult. Can you give some tips on how to approach setting OKRs with team members? And let's start with specifically people who've just started, right? And you've now saying, all right, you're not individual contributor anymore. You got to take responsibility. What are your OKRs? Talk me through that. I mean, that's probably not, I don't know if that's how you do it, but I'd love to know, like, how do you go about getting someone to start setting, whether it's OKRs or something else, but start setting goals and.
Yeah. It's super uncomfortable with transition. Like you're going from, you have a task assigned to you, you build the thing, you release it, customers use it. It's a very, like, that dopamine hit of you've created something tangible. Whereas as a manager, you're having discussions, you're, making decisions, and sometimes you don't see the yield on those decisions, months later or weeks later. And it's that hit of, oh, I've accomplished something. You don't really, at least in my experience, you don't really have as much. So I think it's first like recognizing what are the changes going to be in your role and just how you feel success. And then I think secondly, there's a bit of training around, there's heaps of materials out there in terms of reading best practices, reading tips from people's actual, own stories. A book that I always recommend my team leads is The Making of a Manager by Julie Zhu. Have you read it?
I haven't read it. I keep hearing about it. I feel like I should read it. I was going to ask you about books, so this is good.
Yeah, highly recommend that. I get all my team leads to read that. And there's another book called Staff Engineer that I get all the tech leads to read. And I think it's just like a good, literally, to get on the same page about this is what's in my head for the role. And then let's get on the same page, and then we can have discussions around, what responsibilities specifically are expected of you. And I think just laying it, like being very, very clear, like laying it out like this, especially for someone transitioning into the role for the first time, it's best to be like super clear as to, and if you're the person transitioning, if you don't feel like it's clear, making sure you ask for that, because I think, you're accountable to your manager and the outcomes that they've set for you. So if you don't understand what they want from you, that's going to make your job really hard. So I think that's definitely the next step there. And then over time, just making sure you have those check-in points and one-on-ones to get that feedback and make sure that they're on the right track. In terms of like OKR setting, we don't really have specific OKRs for individuals. It's more just like that competency matrix I spoke about. So, these are the things in your craft. These are the things in growing individuals, growing the team, leadership traits, and then you kind of over time assess them against like how are they performing against those things, and being very direct about, you're doing great at writing documentation and communication, but let's work on how you facilitate rituals and how you get feedback from your team as an example. And like you write that down, you can point to it. I think that's just a good way to keep track of things over time from both sides, manager and person transitioning.
Awesome. And then I guess like once people have kind of transitioned into it a bit, what are some of the things that you find you've got to remind or help people with, or that they drop? Like what's something that's coming up as people get going? It could even be some things you've experienced yourself, like as you get going. Yeah, would love to know about that.
Yeah, I guess there will be specific issues, say with a team member, and maybe it's just like, and again, that managing yourself, like it's like me managing people to also teach them how to manage themselves so that they can manage their people. I think it's constantly reminding them of like what their role is, and when things, you know, things will get emotional and things will get hard, and like that's of course natural, and being leaders of people, it's inevitable. And I think it's trying to support them through those situations. And once you go through something like that, like whether it's, you know, letting someone go or whether it's a promotion, like I think once you go through something and you solve that problem, it's really funny how the next time you know, have that problem on your plate, it's like, oh, that's easy. Like, and I'm ready for, well, not ready for, but I think it's just like the more problems you solve through that experience, the less, you know, they become significant to the burden on how you feel about them. And I think that just builds up over time. And luckily, because I've gone through some of those lessons, I can just like foresee those things and just lay them out for, you know, that team lead, so they know what to anticipate. But then again, you know, going back to setting up frameworks, it's like, I know these things are going to happen, so let's put in frameworks in place to make sure that, you know, we can scale that across the team leads, and the teams don't even need to think about that stuff. So yeah, that's kind of, I guess, what comes up. I think other things is, as we add more engineers, there's new personalities, or as we add more like roles, and as we, you know, restructure the engineering org, there's always like questions around, okay, what does my team own, or like where am I accountable for? I think I've seen that a lot more recently, because we're moving into a more cross-functional world where, you know, there are a little bit more dependencies between teams, and it's not clear like who's owning the e-commerce stuff versus the like medical stuff, right, in our setting. Those are things that we have to constantly revise as we grow. Like it just comes with scale. So yeah, I think that would be the other main thing that comes up.
It's an interesting that one's a really interesting problem. The like dependencies factor, and you start getting teams needing other teams to do things, and then how do you not let that slow down progress and shipping things, especially when you've got a team that's been smaller and is used to just like, well, I just did all the things.
Yeah.
How are you tackling that?
Yeah, this topic is like the bane of my.
This is the problem of the day.
Yeah, like when I started, again, there were like 3 engineers, and we just owned the whole thing, like the monolith at the time. And then as we grew, I think we got up to about maybe like 10 engineers, and then started to split out like structurally. And I think there's this whole thing around like Conway's law, like you structure things in the way you want them to be designed. So, you know, you have, for us, we have specific domains across our pipeline. Like one team will own, you know, X services, another team will own other services. Right now, though, we have a monolith, and there's, you know, different experiences that different teams own, but we're actually on the journey towards microservices to kind of embed that in the architecture, so that we can then, you know, scale our teams to own certain services. And then for product as well, that makes it easier for them, because they don't have to context switch and like understand all the different like webs of what's happening. They can just say, this is the quiz service, this is like the doctor service, this is the blah 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 service. And then it's like, that's how we're trying to tackle that problem. Obviously it's going to take time, but I think the structure and the architecture need to kind of work together there to make it clearer who's owning what, and have clear metrics for each of those teams. So as I mentioned, we have more like project OKRs, we've got like company OKRs, function like engineering OKRs, and then the teams have OKRs as well. So they know, okay, these are the 3 main objectives, the key results, they're measurable, and this is how we'll track progress and make sure we're on track, you know, for the quarter. And that's what we refer to when we, you know, deliver stuff and deliver features.
Okay. Yep. That'll make sense. I'm just we've got about 10-15 minutes. I just want to cast out, like, if there's any kind of questions that you want to ask Davina, please pop them in the chat or the Q&A, because we can start feeding it into the discussion. There was something you mentioned, Davina, on context switching, which I have found in my kind of, whenever I've been talking to engineers in particular, that context switching is something that comes up a lot, especially when they start transitioning from being an individual contributor into being a tech lead or something like that. And I'd love to know your thoughts on how you talk people through that journey from, I just have one thing and you know, I was an engineer, it's so satisfying. You put the headphones on and you just like laser focused on one thing. Yeah. And then you start transitioning to a bit more responsibility, and it can seem like a bit of chaos where you've just got like multiple contexts coming at you from different directions. So would love to hear your thoughts on how you talk people through context switching.
Yeah, it's funny. I feel like when I was an engineer, I could keep my to-do list in my head, but now I have to write everything down because I would definitely forget half of the things that like come up. But yeah, I think even for myself, I found context switching was yeah, quite taxing, I guess, when you go from more focused work to just trying to stay on top of all the things flying at you from all of these different people and stakeholders. I guess like you have way more stakeholders as a manager or as a leader, whether it's from within your team or the product team, or for us, like we're very cross-functional across operations, the medical world, the finance world, analytics world. So I think the way that I tackled it, which my team leads now have adopted, is having like a to-do list or like a board where you literally like anything that comes up, you chuck it in your backlog, but then you have it clear, like this week, these are the things I'm doing. If something comes in, you can assess it against the things that you've, you know, said you were going to do that week, and then kind of prioritize it that way. So then you're not having to do the mental like gymnastics around like, oh, these are the
Remembering
things.
and
Yeah, kind of like doing the like, you know, that meme with the like calculation, and it's like there's like all the formulas and stuff.
I don't know the meme you're talking about.
What the cool I'm talking about.
I'll assume it's a meme that's popular, and I'm the
Yeah,
one that's not in the loop, so that's cool. Let's roll with that.
yeah, I think instead of doing that, just make it easier for yourself and like, you know, open up, like we use Notion, so like open up your Notion board, or you can use Trello as well, and you just have a quick decision. Okay, this, you know, does this fit in here or not? And then I think understanding how much time you actually have in the week as well, I think will help with whether you pull something in or not. And I think it's hard to say no as a manager. Like even for me, it's like, oh, I feel really bad when I say no, but when you know what you have to do, it makes it easier to, you know, for yourself to say, wait, I can't do this. Like I have to say no, or I'll say yes, but later. Or if it's like a strategic thing, for example, coming from, let's say the CEO is like, can you do this thing? I'll be like, yes, but what am I giving up in favor of that? So I think it's
okay,
like,
this is one of my favorite topics to ask a CTO. The CEO comes in, you know,
yeah,
you've got like a full-on backlog, the teams are smashed, they're all focused on a bunch of priorities, and
yeah,
says, I've got it, Davina. And I'm sure you know this conversation, like this is the thing we got to do.
yeah.
And you're sitting there going, how do you deal? Like, what's your method?
Yeah, it depends what it is. If it's like a roadmappy project type thing, I'll be like, you know, we've already set our OKRs for the quarter. Are we changing direction now? Is this, you know, how important is it to course correct at this point? If it's, you know, goal based, and then usually we'll have a meeting. I think I try to try to shield the team a little bit, like still be transparent, of course, but try not to freak everyone out for no reason. So I think it's like, firstly, understanding, okay, why is this a priority? What's the problem? What are we trying to solve? Have that conversation. If then I reflect back on, you know, those 3 pillars that I mentioned, security, product capability, engineering efficiency, like if I can see how that fits into the strategy, I will like be like, okay, this makes sense. How can we fit this into the roadmap? If so, or what are some lower priority things that maybe aren't influencing the key metric that we're trying to hit? I think it's like, that's the conversation, and always having a common language to go back to, whether it's your OKRs or whether it's like the strategy and the pillars that you've aligned on as a team. I think it's like not just the CEO, but like other function, like other heads of, or even the product team. You know, sometimes engineering wants to do refactoring or engineering health work, but product is focused on sprint work and feature work. I think, you know, you have to develop that relationship so that you both understand, okay, this quarter we're committing to 60% sprint work, product work, 40% engineering health, and then you commit to that. And you know, you can't really just change your mind as you go. I think it's like being clear about what you're prioritizing, but it is hard. Like I think
I'm just smiling because it's just like no, we're committed. Yeah, we're all committed. A week later, hey, I've still got this great idea. Like,
great idea. Yeah,
I've been on both sides of the fence, so I kind of like, I have massive empathy for everyone involved. It's my kind of.
It's really hard. I feel like, especially in startups as well, because you know, you've got fundraising goals, or you've got like the board, and you're trying to hit certain ambitions as a company, and you can see the appeal of, you know, let's just do this one extra thing, or let's see how we can do all these things instead of these are the top things. it's really hard, like just to like, I myself want to do all the things as well, but really like we can't, so we have to pick. And I think that's definitely a hard thing. Like it's not a solved problem. I think it's just, yeah, talking it out and understanding the goals.
Awesome. And so is there any other kind of, because we're kind of getting close to end of time, and I just want to make sure the last couple of minutes we've got left of your time, and thank you again for spending time with us. What are some other lessons like that you would love to maybe pass on to someone who has just landed in a management role? Or, well, let's start there, and then I'd love to do someone that wants to get into a engineering management role. So let's start on like someone's just started. Are there any other lessons we haven't covered that you'd love to pass on?
Yeah, I think just reiterating, if you can get a mentor, that's hugely beneficial. And like the way I did it again was through the startup community, and I asked our CEO to kind of help me find someone, and it was through like our investors. And there's like Slack channels, and there's so many meetups now as well. I think you would be able to kind of find one, but I definitely recommend that to have. And I think secondly, yeah, the main thing for me was trying not to feel alone, and whether that was through reading books. There's so much material out there. Like I could send recommendations through as well in terms of what I found useful.
Yeah, please do.
I think, yeah, like that the book that I mentioned, I feel like it was life-changing in the sense that it was talking about problems that I was experiencing, but then also providing practical ways to kind of solve those problems. And I was like, oh, that makes so much sense. And I think if you are transitioning from individual contributor to a manager role, you can like utilize that problem-solving skill set that you have towards management, like designing an org or designing teams, like team topologies. How do you resolve dependencies between teams? All of that is really like just problem solving to me. And I think that's an advantage that we actually have that we can apply as we transition in. So I think, realizing that you have that and having confidence in your problem solving skills, I think goes a long way. So I think that was the other kind of learning that I had just, as I went through this journey.
Okay, cool. And what about someone who wants to, currently an individual contributor and they want to make the jump? What's your tip? What should they be doing? And then I guess the other one is, how do they convince others in the organization to give them a go?
Yeah, I think if there are opportunities that you can kind of get from your manager, like whether it's running a sprint planning session, or whether it's writing up some documentation, or asking your manager, I'm sure they would love this if they could delegate stuff to you. I think if you can take stuff off their plate that's related to the role, and like having that conversation with your manager of like, hey, I want to start this path. What are some things I can try to get a feel for it? I think hopefully like your manager will be super open to that, and also understand these are the areas you want to grow in, and they can actually help you through that. I think for us, we have like a feature lead role where engineers actually own a specific feature. They break down the tickets, they work with stakeholders, and they do a bit of like project management around the deliverability of the project itself. And that is actually how I kind of stepped into that during my time at Atlassian. Like that's how I got a taste of, I really love organizing projects and talking to people and trying to define goals and stuff like that. That was my first experience. So, something like that, or maybe suggesting something like that could be a good way to try it. And then I think from that point, it's just knowing what energizes you and what makes you happy, and then making that clear to your manager. And just kind of going for the role if that's on the table. I think if you can convince them, like I guess for us, it's like it came out of needing to scale the teams. Like I can't manage 30 people, so we need team leads there. And I think if you're transitioning, you actually have a lot of context that you can leverage, as opposed to maybe an external hire, or someone that doesn't actually have I guess management experience with your team specifically. So that was actually a leg up for our internal people, because they knew how the team ran, they knew what the concepts were, and they knew how to fit with the rest of the business. So you kind of de-risked in that kind of scenario, because they know the things, rather than having someone new and that like you have to onboard them and all that kind of stuff. So that might be a way to convince, I guess, your manager, and that I think is actually a huge advantage.
Something other that I kind of just took from what you're saying is to, I think what you mentioned is kind of important, is to like ask and put yourself forward a bit is just something that I want to highlight a bit, because often that helps if someone knows and goes, oh, that person wants more responsibility. Cool. Maybe be careful what you wish for, but they like, oh yeah, I've been waiting for someone. Here you go, delegate. But no, I think that's something I want to highlight, because I think it's a great thing to do, to let people know. If you're not saying anything, people might not know. They might assume you're not interested or something like that. So you got to, I think, putting yourself out there a bit is one that I wanted to highlight, that you implied with what you were saying. I think. Look, Davina, we're kind of out of time now, but I just want to say a massive thank you for coming and sharing your story. I think it's just such a good, it's a good story to share. I think there's some great kind of lessons in there around getting started, the things you can do. And then also, I'm a huge fan of that. You're managing yourself concept, because I just think, it's the only way you can stay emotionally well as well when you're dealing with firefighting, or having to, as you mentioned, like sometimes you've got to let people go, sometimes you've got to deal with conflict, sometimes you've got to tell the CEO no. There's all these kind of situations that can easily derail you personally, and then I guess derail your work. And so I think it's a great topic of managing yourself. So thanks for sharing with us. And I just want to say, thank you to everyone for joining us. And if you're kind of with us now, or you're watching one of the replays, just a massive thank you. And please hit the subscribe button if you're watching us on YouTube, because we have plenty more CTO series coming out, and check out the other interviews in the series. There's a lot of good stuff around being an engineering lead.